Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Balladeva Jaya Subhadramai. Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtata Satashishimal His Divine Grace Abhaijan Naravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Krantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande, Hare Hare Bo. Namo Vishnu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudidayet Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 6, entitled Creation of the Universal Form, text number 38. Atmano vasito vatsa Atmano vasito vatsa Mahima kavinadina Mahima kavinadina Samvatsara sahasrante Samvatsara sahasrante Diya yoga vipakkaya Diya yoga vipakkaya Atmano vasito vatsa Mahima kavinadina Samvatsara sahasrante Diya yoga vipakkaya Atmano vasito vatsa Mahima kavinadina Samvatsara sahasrante Diya yoga vipakkaya Atmano vasito vatsa Mahima kavinadina Samvatsara sahasrante Diya yoga vipakkaya
Atmano vasito vatsa Mahima kavinadina Samvatsara sahasrante Diya yoga vipakkaya.
Word for word translation. Atmanaha, of the Supreme Soul. Avasitaha, known. Vatsa, O my dear son. Mahima, glories. Kavina, by the poet Brahma. Adina, original. Samvatsara, celestial years. Sahasrante, Sahasra ante, at the end of 1000. Diya, by intelligence. Yoga vipakkaya, by matured meditation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation of my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Lord are inconceivable. Purport: there are some froggish philosophers who want to know the Supreme Soul by means of philosophy and mental speculation, and when the devotees who are to some extent in knowledge of the Supreme Lord admit that the glories of the Lord are inestimable or inconceivable, the froggish philosophers adversely criticize them. These philosophers, like the frog in the well who tried to estimate the measurement of the Pacific Ocean, like to take trouble over fruitless mental speculation instead of taking instructions from devotees, like the original poet, namely Brahma. Lord Brahma underwent a severe type of meditation for 1000 celestial years, yet he said that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. Therefore, what can the froggish philosophers hope to gain from their mental speculations? It is said in the Brahma Samhita that the mental speculator may fly through the sky of speculation with the velocity of the mind or the wind for thousands of millions of years, and still he will find it inconceivable. The devotees, however, do not waste time in such vain searching after knowledge of the Supreme, but they submissively hear the glories of the Lord from bona fide devotees. Thus they transcendently enjoy the process of hearing and chanting. The Lord approves of the devotional activities of the devotees or Mahatmas, and he says, Mahatmanastu mam partha devim prakritim ashritaha bhajantyanya manaso jnatva bhutadim avyayam satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dhridavartaha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, text 13 and 14. The pure devotees of the Lord take shelter of the Para Prakriti, the internal potency of the Lord, called Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Srimati Radharani, or Srimati Rukmini Devi, and thus they become actual Mahatmas or great souls. Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculation, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. Devotional service is manifested by the primary process of hearing and chanting about the activities of the Lord. This transcendental method practiced by the Mahatmas gives them sufficient knowledge of the Lord, because if the Lord can at all be known to some extent, it is only through the means of devotional service and no other way. One may go on speculating and waste the valuable time of his human life, but that will not help anyone to enter into the precincts of the Lord. The Mahatmas, however, are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation, because they enjoy hearing about his glorious activities in his transcendental dealings with his devotees or with the demons. The devotees take pleasure in both and are happy in this life and the life after. Translation again. O my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could only know that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Langayate Kritim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurutindhara Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So we're reading the concluding verses of the 6th chapter of the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein after explaining to Vidura how the Supreme Lord Karnadakashayi Vishnu heard the prayers of the demigods and then entered into the universe as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and manifested his Vishvarup, explains how from the Lord everything else is created. And after explaining the Vishvarup and how the Vishvarup begins to or teaches the demigods how to cooperate with one another, how to perform their functions in relation with one another. Then it's mentioned that by Maitreya Muni himself, how unqualified he feels to be able to explain this knowledge because of the Lord's inconceivable nature being unestimable and inconceivable. But still, he says, whatever he has heard from his spiritual master is simply repeated. So, in this verse today, Maitreya Muni is again emphasizing this point, that what to speak of himself, Brahma, the original, or the firstborn living entity within the universe, known as Adi Kavi, the poet. It's mentioned that when Brahma appeared on the lotus that appeared from the navel of Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, when Brahma appeared, then Brahma did not know where he was and what he was doing. Brahma could only hear and feel the waves and the winds within the universe. And it was so horrific or so ghastly that Brahma was very scared. And so therefore Brahma in the darkness decided to search out where he was. So he continued to go down and up and down the stem, from his lotus seat, up and down. And he still could not find what was happening around him. He could not understand what was happening. Then it's mentioned that when Brahma again sat down on the lotus seat, then he heard the waves hitting onto the stem of the lotus that's emanating from Garbhodakashayi Vishnu's navel. And he heard the word Tappa. So when the waves hit, he heard Tappa. And so he immediately understood by the inspiration of the Lord within the heart that he had to perform tapasya. And it's mentioned that he performed tapasya for 1,000 celestial years. And even after performing that tapasya, when the Lord then revealed himself to Brahma, it's mentioned that Brahma also could understand that despite such mature meditation, despite his highly qualified position, despite achieving the greatest position within the material universe, that he understood one thing, that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. So what to speak of Lord Brahma, even Adishesh, Anantasesh, he has been glorifying the pastimes of the Lord. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Lord Nityananda, his expansion as Anantasesh, has been glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for as many mouths as he has for as long as possible, and still he has not come to the end of the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So what to speak of the pastimes of Sri Krishna? So this Brahma, the Adi Kavi, the original person or the poet of the universe, he could only understand one thing, that everything is about the Lord is inconceivable. But unfortunately, there are the froggish philosophers Prabhupada talks about. And these personalities, being envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, challenge the Lord by means of philosophy and mental speculation. So their whole idea is that they want to bring the Supreme Personality of Godhead within the clutches or within the confines of their fertile brains. And Prabhupada often mentions that these scientists try to use the resources that Krishna gives, and they take credit for whatever Krishna has done. So if you have a look at all these Nobel Prizes and this prize and that prize, they say we have discovered it. That's all they've done. It's already been there. They have just simply identified it somehow or other by the mercy of the Lord. And because it's always been there and they finally discover it, then they go and try stake claim for the existence of it. So say, for example, the whole idea behind, the idea of Newtonian physics, the idea of quantum physics, the idea of, nuclear fission, all of these things, they always existed. In fact, they were created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the froggish philosophers, funnily enough, taking the very same fertile brain that's been given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they use that to try and outwit the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not very logical. In fact, if you continue reading in this chapter, the last verse, it's quite funny because Prabhupada has translated words, mind and ego. This is text 40. Words, mind and ego with their respective controlling demigods have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto Him as a matter of sanity. So in other words, those who think that there is no need to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, those who think that they are the Supreme Personality of Godhead or there is no God, they are insane. Because they cannot explain how everything has come into existence. They can only explain to their certain understanding why. To a certain function, but they cannot understand it to its full functionality or relationship with the other items within the material world. So this we have seen example of in Brahma Vimohana Leela. That when Lord Brahma decided after seeing Krishna enter into the mouth of Aghasur, and when Krishna then expanded himself so that he choked Aghasur within his mouth. So then when all the demigods and all the residents of the higher planetary systems, they saw the soul of Aghasur exit from the top of his head, and when it exited the top of his head, then it stationed itself within the sky for some time. So when Krishna came out of the mouth of Aghasur, then it merged into his effulgence, or merged into his body as they saw it. So then, when all the demigods saw this, Brahma was there. And when Brahma saw this, he was thinking, wait a second, something's not right. How can a small boy like this do? But still, Brahma observed continued to observe Krishna's pastimes in Braj. So as soon as Krishna saved his coward boys from this Aghasur, then they decided to have lunch. It's mentioned by the acharyas that time is absent in the material world, in the spiritual world rather, and it's just simply a prop. But even though it's a prop or a stage, arranges the stage for the Lord's pastimes, still the Lord has other functions or other facilities that help him arrange his Astakalya Lila, his pastimes in the material, his daily pastimes in the spiritual world. And it's mentioned there that whenever Krishna would kill a demon, that would signify the time to take prasad with his cowherd friends. So when he would go to the forest in the morning, he'd kill a demon and take prasad. Then he would go and kill another demon, and then he would take his evening snack and then go back to Braj, back to the cowherd village. So after Krishna would kill Aghasur, then he went to the soft sands of the Yamuna, and nearby in the forest, then he sat there with his cowherd boyfriends and he took prasad. And it is this scene that Lord Brahma saw, that here is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, to him he was a bit doubtful. Is this really the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He's just a small boy here performing great feats, great activities. So let me test him and actually see if it is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself or not. So, as we know how the pastime goes, Brahma then steals the cows, and the cowherd boys, seeing the cows going away, send Krishna to go, are eager to get up and go and get the cows, and Krishna says, no, you all sit here and take your prasad, I'll go get and fetch the cows, don't disturb your prasadam. So then Krishna gets up, and while Krishna gets up, in his left hand he's got this nice yogurt preparation with rice and fruits in his left hand. And as Brahma sees this, because Brahma, to get to his position, it's mentioned, I'm not sure, I forgot, it's either 100 years or 1,000 years, that in his previous 1,000 or 100 years of life, he should have performed the Varnashram Dharma without any mistakes. Without any mistakes consecutively to be able to achieve his position. And it's mentioned, well, if you think of it that way, then Brahma must be very pakka when it comes to his etiquettes in following the rules and regulations of the Vedic literature. So then seeing a so-called great personality holding food in the left hand, then of course Brahma, with his limited understanding, would start doubting the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because Brahma knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he knows him to a limited degree. And his relationship with the Lord is somewhat to an extent of Sakya. Because after all, when the Lord appeared to him, he shook Brahma's hand and told Brahma that now it is time to create the universe. And he imparted the instructions to Lord Brahma in that way. So Brahma, seeing Krishna performs, the Supreme Personality of Godhead perform such intimate, confidential pastimes, he got a bit curious and wondered whether this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So then he stole the cowherd boys after the Lord had disappeared. So when he stole the cowherd boys, Krishna came back after not finding the calves and not finding the cowherd boys. And Krishna enjoyed to a certain extent that bewilderment which was arranged by his Leela Shakti. But then he immediately understood that Brahma is doing this. So therefore from him he manifested all the cowherd boys and the calves again. So again, after 1 year, after Brahma, for his moment, disappears and comes back and sees what Krishna is up to, he sees the cowherd boys and calves there again. And then Krishna, just to further bewilder Brahma, or to further manifest or exhibit his pastimes and potencies, then he manifests each of these cowherd boys the Vishnu form. And Brahma seeing the Vishnu form, it's mentioned that Brahma saw all living entities worshipping the Lord along with the energies. So each personality of Godhead he saw all living entities worshipping that personality of Godhead along with his energies. And he saw unlimited personalities because he saw there were unlimited cowherd boys of Krishna. So then Brahma got extremely confused, extremely bewildered. Because here's that boy, I stole the cows and the calves, but here I'm seeing Vishnu again and the multiple calves and the cows again. And here the cowherd boys are again becoming Vishnu. So he became extremely bewildered. And it's mentioned that just as the glowworm has no potency in the sunshine or during the daytime, similarly, just as the snow has no value or no wonder within the nighttime, similarly, Lord Brahma's speculative or intellectual propensities or potency had no place in front of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, Brahma then, being bewildered, approaches the Lord, and the Lord then retracts or removes that bewildering potency of his. And Brahma starts offering prayers to the Lord. And one of the prayers that Lord Brahma offers is that jnana prayasam udapasanamantameva jivanti sanmukuritam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shrutikatam tanavan manobir ye prayasa jita jito apiyasitais lokyam. That those, even while remaining situated in their established social positions, throw away the process of speculative knowledge with their body, mind and words, offer all respects to the descriptions of your personalities and activities, dedicating their lives to these narrations which are vibrated by you personally and by your pure devotees. Certainly conquer your lordship, although you are otherwise unconquerable by anyone within the three worlds. So this nicely sums up the second half of the purport. The first half Prabhupada talks about that about the froggish philosophers, but what to speak of them and their so-called austerities. Because if you think about it, for them to be able to come up with their understanding of the material universe, some austerity needs to be performed. Take for example quantum physics. To be able to see the world through that sort of vision or filter, it's mentioned, I think it's 7 years or 14 years it takes of training to be able to unlearn conventional classic physics to be able to learn quantum physics. So that's not a type of austerity, because one has to give up one's understanding and focus on understanding rather than focusing on what they've seen or heard, but try to mold their consciousness or their intelligence to be able to see it from a different perspective. So that's a type of austerity, to be able to understand or see the world from that perspective. But what to speak of their austerity? Lord Brahma went through such a severe type of austerity for 1,000 celestial years. And even after he performed such austerities, which even the so-called philosophers cannot even think or imagine, still he's saying that the glories of the Lord are inconceivable. So in this verse, Mahaprabhu would often quote or would appreciate this verse a lot, especially the stane stita shrutikatam tanavan manobir. That whatever position you may be in your varnashrama, in your varna or ashrama, Sthane stita, you continue to stay in that position and perform your duties. Sthane stita shutigatam, just lend your process of hearing, your oral process of hearing to the Tanuvan Mano Bir, to the glories of the Lord, Tanuvan and Mano, that through this body, mind and words, by doing so, gradually one will be able to perfect Krishna consciousness. So, Prabhupada then mentions in this purport in relation to how Lord Brahma is not able to even conceive of the glories of the Lord, the complete glories of the Lord. He says that Brahma didn't take shelter of the austerities again. To be able to understand the glories of the Lord, Brahma just simply heard from the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. Brahma gave up the speculative potency. Atapite deva padam pujadvaya prasada leshanugrihita evihi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya ekopi chiram vichinman. That Brahma himself says in his prayers after this Brahma Vimohana Lila, that, my dear Lord, if people want to understand you on their own, it's not possible. But if they get prasada lesha means just even a fraction. Prasada lesha leshanugrihita evihi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno. They can understand you to the best of their capability. Obviously cannot understand the Supreme Lord in full, but they can understand Krishna to the best of their ability. So, how does one get the mercy of the Lord? One takes shelter of Mahatmanastamam Partha Devim Prakritimashitaha. They take shelter of the Mahatmas, and they naturally, by taking shelter of the Mahatmas, they're taking shelter of Devi Prakriti, Para Prakriti. As Prabhupada mentions here, Lakshmi Devi, Sita Devi, Srimati Radharani, or Srimati Rukmani Devi. So they take shelter. How do they take shelter? Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridavratha namasyantisht mam bhaktya nityayukta upasate. That they are linked with the Lord constantly in hearing and chanting of His glories. Now, this is the glorious nature of devotional service, because the desire to perform activities is there. Desires are there, and the senses are very strong. And senses being strong and being in working in tandem with the desires, we are constantly desiring the senses to come in contact with the sense objects. So when Krishna in Bhagavad Gita tells Arjuna to perform Buddhi Yoga, but then to get up and stand and fight, it is natural for Arjuna, who did not want to fight and get involved in any sinful reaction, it is natural for him to think of Buddhi as some mental speculative process wherein one gives up activities and goes to the forest. Because the natural tendency is we perform activities with our senses. And when we perform activities with the senses, then we are subject to the three kleshas. We're subject to miseries that are pertaining to the mind, pertaining to the self, pertaining to other living entities, and pertaining to the natural disasters caused by higher living entities. So then, naturally one feels, what is the purpose of performing activities altogether? I'm suffering, I'm frustrated, so what's the point of all these activities? Let me just give it up. So, rather than that, Krishna then clarifies to Arjuna, actually, there are two types, or two ways of attaining spiritual transcendental realization. One by the process of giving up work, and the other by a process of karma yoga, or doing work and giving up the results. Of the two, performing work for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is much more easier. It's recommended. Why? Because it is an easy process to perform. Process of giving up work, attaining self-realization by mental speculation is a very troublesome activity. It is full of difficulties, and in the end one does not reach the higher stage of bliss. Rather, one stays on a lower level and again falls down into material existence. Ye arvindaksha vimukti maninas tvasta bhavad avashuddha buddhaya aruya krichrena param padam tata patanti adonadita yusmadangraya. As Prabhupada often quotes these prayers by the demigods to Krishna within the womb, he often quotes this to tell that living entities that try to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by their mental speculation or through their understanding of Brahman, and try to attain to the impersonal aspect of the Lord. For them, they do not stay there. They again fall back down, having not taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. What does it mean to take shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord? It means to perform devotional service. Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculations, but they actually take to the devotional service of the Lord without the slightest deviation. This is a very important sentence Prabhupada's making, because Mahatmas are not fond of indulging in mental speculation means that there's a verse that Yudhishthira Maharaj says in the Vanaparva of Mahabharata, that Tarka Pratishta Shutayo Vibhinna Nasav Rishir Matam Nabinnam Dharmasya Tattva Nihita Guhayam Mahajana Yena Gata Sapanta. There, that Yudhishthira Maharaj is telling that no matter how much you engage in tarka, in this logical debating, no matter how much one try to become a muni, because a muni is not, a person is not considered a muni unless their philosophy or ideology differs from another. Regardless of taking up to such paths, one will not be able to understand Dharma, because Dharma is situated within the deep cavern or within the deep recesses of the heart of the pure devotee. Dharmasya tattvam nihita guhayam, it's secret. It's like within a cave. And it's secret, and where is it lying? Where is this treasure lying? It's lying within the hearts of the Mahajana. So if you take shelter of the Mahajans or the Mahatmas, then naturally one will be able to Mahajana yena gata sapantaha. One will be able to find the path to be able to achieve the same destination as the Mahajans or the Mahatmas. So Prabhupada is saying they don't indulge in mental speculation. They actually take to the devotional service of the Lord. Prabhupada says that there's a difference between the words bhaja and bhakti. Bhaja means to worship. Bhakti means activity, devotional service. It is not simply just devotion. There is an activity. Prabhupada says love means service. There is some activity involved. There is some impetus that needs to be there to be able to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by action or by manifesting the love in some sort of way. Because simply by words, that is yes, that's okay, that is devotion. But actually, to what extent are you willing to sacrifice your own pleasures and time and energy in pleasing the other living entity, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead? So that is love. Love is a expression of, or service is an expression of love. So they take to devotional service of the Lord without slightest deviation. Where is it? Yatantascha drida vrataha. That they take to Krishna consciousness or devotional service without deviation. What are the two words? It's undeviated and unmotivated devotional service. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahoituki apratihata. Ahoituki means without any ulterior motive. Apratihata means without any stoppage, without interruption. Yayatma suprasidati. That's how we get satisfaction. Yayatma suprasidati. One will be extremely satisfied. Because Krishna is satisfied. Krishna is the tree. By watering the root of the tree, everything and everyone is nourished. Just as the leaves and the branches and the twigs and the flowers of the tree is nourished by watering the root. Similarly, by serving the Supreme Personality of God, one will naturally be satisfied, because we are simply parts and parcels of the Lord. Now, another point in this section or purport, Prabhupada often mentions devotional service means activities. And those activities are the Navavidha Bhakti. That Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, Smaranam Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakyam Atma Nivedanam. That these processes of devotional service, if we just perform one of these, Krishna will be pleased and satisfied. If we engage our senses at any point in time in one of these 9, or all of the 9s, or some of the 9, Krishna will be pleased and satisfied with us. Because sometimes if you're in your own head, when you're not performing devotional service appropriately or properly, or you find yourself in a lull where Maya seems to have you within her grasp, when you come to perform or come to the temple to perform some devotional service, then the doubt comes within the mind. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Like, how is Krishna going to be pleased? You may come and you may mechanically stand and chant in front of the deities, waiting for Bhagavatam class to finish so that you can take prasad. So then naturally one will then think, what's the point? Why am I doing this? How is Krishna being pleased? But we should take it for granted that performing all of these activities as Srila Prabhupada has given us, Krishna is pleased. If we just simply come for Mangalati and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna is pleased. If we come before the Lordship, Shri Radha Gopinath, chant and dance, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Krishna is pleased. If we lend our ears to hearing about Srimad Bhagavatam at least 45 minutes to 1 hour a day, that is pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So by doing this devotional service, by hearing and chanting, specifically hearing and chanting, because for the neophyte devotee, it begins with Shraddha, some faith, and Sadhu Sangha. Then comes Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivriti, so on and so forth, all the way to Prema. It begins with Shraddha. And Prabhupada mentions in his purport that by hearing from the bona fide spiritual master or the bona fide source, then naturally one will develop faith. And having developed this faith, then one will again engage in Sadhu Sangha, association with devotees. And by engaging in the association of devotees in hearing and chanting, Mahaprabhu says that this is the basic watering process for the creeper of devotional service. What is the main thing that causes the creeper of devotional service to grow so that it will then take shelter at Krishna's lotus feet and produce the fruit of love of Godhead? It's hearing and chanting. And just as a plant needs to constantly get nourishment by watering, similarly our creeper of devotional service requires constant hearing and chanting of the glories of the Lord. And we must hear from the Mahatmas. We must be careful not to hear from any unscrupulous source. In fact, this is how contaminating it is to hear from unbona fide sources. To the extent that it's mentioned that yato sarpa yata paya, that just as if you shuti, that's not the right verse. When one hears from those who are not from the bona fide parampara system, it is like taking milk that's been touched by the lips of a serpent. It is contaminated, it is poisonous. So when we perform devotional service, when we hear from sources, we must be very careful. We may think that, I'm just hearing, the news, or I'm just hearing some gossip from some place, or I'm hearing some mundane topic. We have to be very careful that comes and contaminates the heart. How does it contaminate the heart? It makes us more and more attached to the bodily conception of life. And the more and more attached we are to the bodily conception of life, the less and less we'll be able to understand Krishna. We'll then fall into the categories of avajananti mam mudha manashim tanam ashritaha. We'll then slowly consider that Krishna has a body and Krishna is within the body. In other words, Krishna is non-different from us. He's just another living entity stuck within material world. And this is how the Mayavadi tendency again reigns supreme within the core of the heart. Then comes the last snare of Maya, thinking that we are no different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And again, we'll fall into material existence. Abrahma puvana loka punaravartino rajana. Again birth, again death. So we have taken that cycle of birth and death too many times, and we finally come to Krishna consciousness. So we should take full advantage by hearing and chanting about the glories and activities of the Lord. And this itself is enough to be able to understand Krishna. Whatever we've understood in Srimad Bhagavatam so far, that is sufficient in understanding. Prabhupada said the Gurukul system is there just to teach the children, the devotees, children of the devotees, the young Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis about Krishna. There is no need to understand this material knowledge, so-called knowledge given by the universities and schools. Prabhupada was saying, let them just simply read Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. That in itself is enough knowledge for them to be able to live in the material world, to be able to engage in Krishna's service. Prabhupada often says you can find everything in Srimad Bhagavatam. As the publishers mentioned, if you want politics, you'll find politics here. You want poetry, you'll find the topmost poetry here. You want to understand or study religion, you'll find that here. So everything is present within Srimad Bhagavatam. And if you just simply hear, like we have heard for the last three cantos, 2 cantos and 6 chapters, what even the scientists could never even imagine, the cosmic manifestation of the Lord and how the Lord creates the universe step by step. That we have simply understood by hearing. Simply by hearing from Srila Prabhupada in his recorded chanting, his books. Hearing and chanting. So it's mentioned here, the Mahatmas, they give up this idea of speculating and wasting valuable time in this way, because as Prabhupada mentions earlier, that ekopyasor pantastu koti satavatsara sampragamyor vayor athapi manaso munipungavanam, that these sages, they are using their mental faculties and trying to find out the Supreme Personality of Godhead's abode and His position, millions and millions of years traversing through this universe. If they try by the speed of mind or wind, they'll never be able to attain that abode of the Lord. They'll never be able to understand the nature of the Lord. So the devotees understanding this, what to speak of spending so many time with this mind or speed of mind or wind, traveling for thousands of millions of years trying to find the Lord. The devotees just give up that process and immediately accept, being humble and understanding the limitations of their own senses and their mind, accept the knowledge as it is given by the Parampara system. So Mahatmas are not concerned with knowing the Lord by mental speculation because they enjoy hearing about His glorious activities. And they hear the transcendental dealings of the Lord with the demons or the devotees. For them it's absolute. Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavad Gita that, and in the beginning of Bhagavatam, that why some Mayavadi philosophers or materialists or so-called speculators, they take up reading about Krishna's pastimes and immediately jump to the Rasa Leela. And they condemn the devotees. Why do you even bother studying about the Mahabharata war? Why are you concerned in understanding such mundane subject matter? But the devotees understand that whatever activities the Lord performs is absolute. Everything of the Lord is absolute in nature. So I just wanted to touch upon one particular pastime of the Lord, because devotees take pleasure in both hearing of the Lord's devotees, the Lord's activities or dealings with His devotees and the demons, and they're happy in this life and the other. So janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. They are happy in this life and the next because they understand janma karma cha me divyam, the transcendental nature of Krishna's birth and activities. So I was reading recently the pastimes of Paundraka, and it's very interesting after reading the pastimes of the Lord, especially when you read Krishna book in relation to Srimad Bhagavatam 10th canto. It's very nice. You get different perspective of the pastime. The details seem to pop up very easily. Like when Paundraka, or the king of Karusha, who is a friend of the king of Kasi, he was brought up around ignorant fools. And each of these fools told him that you are actually Vasudev incarnate. You have actually descended for the deliverance of the living entities of this material world. And this fool accepted what they had to say. And even in our current times we also have experience of so-called incarnation or yogi or deliverer of the fallen souls of Kali Yuga being told at a young age by his family members that he is actually the Supreme Person, the incarnation of Vishnu. And he is having many, many followers, and he is going around doing all of these things. But if you actually have a look, the family members and other relatives and so-called associates, they benefit from such activities. So similarly in this way, by putting Paundraka in that position, everyone around Paundraka benefited, because the common mass of people are ignorant. And they just, the residents of Karusha and Kasi accepted Paundraka as Vasudev. And all the associates and relatives and everyone enjoyed in that way, especially those, the ignorant, who glorified Paundraka in that way. So and then Paundraka sent a message to Krishna in Dwarka. And when in front of the whole assembly of the Yadava dynasty, then this messenger told Krishna on behalf of Paundraka that you sinful person Krishna, I am the original Vasudeva and I have appeared in this age to deliver the fallen souls, to deliver all the living entities here. I am holding the original insignia, the conch, the conch, lotus club and the disc of Vasudeva. I am Vasudeva. You should immediately give up these things and take shelter of me and stop your so-called charade of being Vasudeva. And it's mentioned there that when this was read out to the Yadavas, all the Yadavas headed by Ugrasena had a big laugh. Such a long laugh. They enjoyed it so much. You know, when you laugh so much your belly hurts, they all enjoyed it so much. But Krishna didn't laugh actually. You'd think Krishna laughed. Krishna simply smiled. But Krishna smiled enjoying the laughter of the Yadavas. That's Krishna's enjoyment. Krishna didn't find so much enjoyment of this rascal saying that he's Vasudeva. Think about it in one sense. Earlier in Nectar Devotion it mentioned when Krishna was challenged by the Yavana. What's his name? The Kalayavana. Then Krishna uses, it's mentioned, the ghastly rasa. He chastises this Kalayavana by calling him a frog. Yeah? Calls him, you dirty frog. So Krishna enjoys the rasa. So then when Krishna saw the Yadavas enjoying, laughing, then Krishna smiled and had some fun. And he said, yes, my dear Paundraka, I'll certainly give up my disc, club, lotus, and the disc, club, lotus, and what am I forgetting? Conch. I'll definitely give this up to you. And the word used there in Sanskrit also is actually translated as to give up or to throw away or to cast aside. So Krishna would definitely give it up to Paundraka. Give it to Paundraka later on. So then he sends the message back with the messenger to Paundraka. And since it's mentioned that Paundraka had to patiently listen to all of these insults by Krishna. And Krishna did not stop there. He could not wait. So then he immediately took his army and surrounded the king of Kashi's place, because that's where Kausha was living. The king of Kausha, or Paundraka, was living with his friend king of Kashi. And when Paundraka saw this, Paundraka came out with 2 akshahunis of soldiers. And behind him came the king of Kashi with 3 akshahunis of soldiers. So there it's mentioned that he had everything. He had all of the paraphernalia of the Lord, imitation paraphernalia of the Lord, down to the details. He's wearing nice yellow cloth. He had a fake tuft of golden hair, imitating Krishna's, what's it called? The Srivatsa. And then he had a fake Kaustubha mani. He had a Vaijayanti mala. He had fake insignia. So he had the fake conch disc, club, and the lotus petal, lotus flower. It's like, you know, sometimes you have styrofoam hands and stuff, people showing. You can imagine that he was having all of these fake extra 2 hands holding all of the insignia of the Lord. And it's mentioned he had the shark-shaped earrings and everything, down to the details, mukut, everything. And when he came out, Krishna couldn't restrain his laughter. It's mentioned that there's parihasya, and then I think the word is beta, or there's another prefix given there. It's mentioned that parihasya or prahasya, Krishna simply smiled mildly. But when Krishna saw Paundraka, he couldn't help but laugh very heartily. He enjoyed seeing the rascal as he is. So the mundane philosophers and Mayavadis, those speculators who are trying to reach that position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by trying to understand everything, for them